Hello and welcome to this brand new edition of Global Lens on News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. As always, we have a packed show for you. Let's get started with our big focus. The diplomatic row between India and Canada has reached a new low, with India announcing this evening that it is withdrawing its High Commissioner to Ottawa. Earlier in the day, in a blistering statement of a kind perhaps not seen before in Indian diplomacy, the government of India took Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to the cleaners. Canada's hostility towards India under the Trudeau dispensation has been on display for a long time now, but that hostility has acquired new proportions, and evidence of that is Canada's latest charge that the Indian High Commissioner to Ottawa and other diplomats are persons of interest linked to the investigation into the murder of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. In addition to issuing the very sharply worded statement, India this evening summoned the Canadian envoy and announced its decision to withdraw the High Commissioner as well as the other targeted diplomats from Ottawa. The Ministry of External Affairs emphasized that the Trudeau government's actions have put the safety of Indian diplomats at risk amidst growing extremism and violence, stating that India has no faith in the current Canadian government. Earlier in the day, excoriating the Justin Trudeau government for smearing India as part of its vote bank politics and terming the new allegation preposterous imputations, New Delhi said it now reserves the right to take further steps in response, and well, it has acted. It has decided to withdraw India's High Commissioner to Canada and the other diplomats who are being targeted by the Canadian authorities. The Ministry of External Affairs said earlier today, the Canadian government did not share a shred of evidence of India's involvement in Nijjar's killing, despite repeated requests, and stated that Trudeau is indulging in vote bank politics and not doing enough to tackle separatist and extremist elements on Canadian soil. Let's take a look at the complete MEA statement that was issued earlier today, ripping into Justin Trudeau and his government. It says, and I quote, "We have received a diplomatic communication from Canada yesterday suggesting that the Indian High Commissioner and other diplomats are persons of interest in a matter related to an investigation in that country. The government of India strongly rejects these preposterous imputations and ascribes them to the political agenda of the Trudeau government that is centered around vote bank politics." Since Prime Minister Trudeau made certain allegations in September 2023, the Canadian government has not shared a shred of evidence with the government of India despite many requests from our side. This latest step follows interactions that have again witnessed assertions without any facts. This leaves little doubt that on the pretext of an investigation, there's a deliberate strategy of smearing India for political gains. Prime Minister Trudeau's hostility to India has long been in evidence. In 2018, his visit to India, which was aimed at currying favour with a vote bank, rebounded to his discomfort. His cabinet has included individuals who have openly associated with an extremist and separatist agenda regarding India. Trudeau's naked interference in Indian internal politics in December 2020 showed how far he was willing to go in this regard. That his government was dependent on a political party whose leader openly espouses a separatist ideology vis-a-vis India only aggravated matters. Under criticism for turning a blind eye to foreign interference in Canadian politics, Trudeau's government has deliberately brought in India in an attempt to mitigate the damage. This latest development targeting Indian diplomats is now the next step in that direction. It is no coincidence that it takes place as Prime Minister Trudeau is to depose before a commission on foreign interference. It also serves the anti-India separatist agenda that the Trudeau government has constantly pandered to for narrow political gains. To that end, the Trudeau government has consciously provided space to violent extremists and terrorists to harass, threaten and intimidate Indian diplomats and community leaders in Canada. This has included death threats to them and to Indian leaders. All these activities have been justified in the name of freedom of speech. Some individuals who've entered Canada illegally have been fast-tracked for citizenship. Multiple extradition requests from the government of India in respect of terrorists and organized crime leaders living in Canada have been disregarded. High Commissioner Sanjay Kumar Verma is India's senior-most serving diplomat with a distinguished career spanning 36 years. He has been ambassador in Japan and Sudan while also serving in Italy, Turkey, Vietnam and China. The aspersions cast on him by the government of Canada are ludicrous and deserve to be treated with contempt. The government of India has taken cognizance of the activities of the Canadian High Commission in India that serve the political agenda of the current regime. This led to the implementation of the principle of reciprocity in regard to diplomatic representation. India now reserves the right to take further steps in response to these latest efforts of the Canadian government to concoct allegations against Indian diplomats. That is the complete and extremely sharply worded statement that was issued earlier today by India's Ministry of External Affairs. Now, ties between India and Canada nosedived in September last year when Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau alleged Indian government agents' involvement in the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil. New Delhi rejected those charges as motivated and absurd. Nijjar, chief of the Khalistan Tiger Force and a man designated as a terrorist by India, was found murdered by a group of unknown assailants on the 18th of June 2023. Subsequently, in September, soon after his return to Ottawa after attending the G20 summit in New Delhi, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced in the Canadian Parliament that Indian agents were behind the killing of Nijjar, who worked at the Guru Nanak Gurudwara of Surrey, British Columbia in Canada. Subsequently, India froze visa facilities for Canadian citizens, and in October that year, 41 Canadian diplomats were withdrawn from Canada's missions in India. Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly described India's move as violative of the Vienna Convention. India denied that charge, saying that staff representation had to follow the principle of reciprocity. The freeze in visa processing was enforced till November last year in view of the threats to Indian diplomats issued by extremist pro-Khalistan elements. For a long time now, India has repeatedly highlighted its concerns over the flourishing pro-Khalistan movement in Canada, demanding that Canada take firm and verifiable action against those advocating violence and extremism. Indian officials have warned that the nexus between Khalistani extremists, organized crime, drug syndicates and human trafficking should be a matter of concern for Canada as well. The latest exchange of sharp words between the two countries comes after a brief encounter between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Justice Trudeau on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Laos last week. While sources in New Delhi described the meeting as inconsequential, Trudeau painted it as a brief exchange in which he reiterated his concerns about the safety of Canadians and upholding the rule of law. At a press conference, Trudeau said, "I won't go into details about what we talked about. The safety of Canadians is one of the fundamental responsibilities of any Canadian government, and that is what I'll stay focused on." The Canadian Prime Minister seems to have made it his personal agenda to repeatedly attack India. His irresponsible statements, vote bank politics, and flirtations with extremist elements have caused immeasurable damage to what was once a strong bilateral relationship between India and Canada with strong people-to-people ties. The question we're asking on Global Lens tonight is this: what explains Trudeau's growing hostility towards India? Why these ludicrous new allegations and why now? Is Trudeau getting increasingly desperate ahead of the elections in Canada in 2025? Is he hoping to revive his sagging political fortunes by making anti-India statements so as to woo the extremist Khalistani and anti-India forces that he's already in bed with? Is he hoping to boost his rapidly plunging approval ratings at home, with poll after poll suggesting that his popularity with the Canadian people is at an all-time low? Is he making frantic efforts to make up for the electoral losses his party suffered in the by-polls this summer, especially in the politically significant Montreal and Toronto, both Liberal Party fortresses? Remember, he barely survived two no-confidence motions in September and October after Khalistani separatist Jagmeet Singh, who had propped up Trudeau's minority government, decided to withdraw support. Is Justin Trudeau grasping at straws, sensing an embarrassing defeat in the 2025 elections? Or is he too nervous about his impending appearance before a parliamentary commission where he needs to explain how his government allowed foreign interference in Canadian elections, a reference to China, right under its nose? Whichever way you look at it, Justice Trudeau increasingly looks like a weak, inept, unpopular leader who knows he could soon be riding into the sunset and is therefore resorting to desperate measures in the hope of hiding his own failures by taking cheap potshots at another country, in this case, the world's largest democracy.
The Government of Canada has done what India has long been asking for. Canada has provided credible, irrefutable evidence of ties between agents of the Government of India and a murder of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil. Now it is time for India to live up to what it said it would do and look into those allegations. It is in the interest of both our countries and the peoples of our countries to get to the bottom of this. Canada stands ready to cooperate.